So at this time, a one-on-one on human trafficking, our Assemblies of God missionary to the issue of human trafficking, Valarie Goff. Let's give Valarie a hand. God bless you, Valarie.
Thank you. How are you guys doing after that presentation? It was heavy, but it was good. It is needed. Very, very important. But before I get started, because I have a lot that I want to share today, I would just like to thank the district for setting up this event and giving me the opportunity to share about human trafficking. And so I know they'll be showing that behind me. So my first question before I get into the presentation, I would be curious to know who in this room is aware about human trafficking. How much would you say that you know a lot about human trafficking? Just raising your hand that you know a lot. A little bit? A little bit about human trafficking? Okay. Well, this presentation will be good for you guys. Let's see here. Okay, so the definition of human trafficking is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of forced labor or commercial sex. So the legal definition for human trafficking is very long, has legal terms in it, but a lot of like anti-trafficking organizations use this definition. And I'll break it down a little later on in the presentation. So the reality of the problem is there's an estimated 27 million slaves in the world today. And the reason why they are referred as slaves is because they are forced to do things that they don't want to do. They're getting paid little to no money. The number to that, it's very hard. I know it's 27 million slaves, but there's 10. It's hard. It's under the radar, and it's very difficult to. I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry. It's very difficult to get numbers for women and men that are forced into this type of work, because a lot of times they don't refer to themselves as victims. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the world, second only to the trafficking of drugs, which is said to skyrocket to number 1 because drugs you can sell once, but a trafficking victim, a young boy, a young girl, you can sell more times. Like, you can sell more than once. So trafficking in the world, the global annual revenue is more than $150 billion. That's more than Nike, Google, and Starbucks combined, to help us understand how big of an issue this is. And 14,500 to 17,500 people are trafficked into the United States every year. So I know a lot of times we like to think that this is an international problem, but it is happening here in the United States, and there are people that are trafficked that are sent here to be trafficked into the United States from overseas. So trafficking in the U.S., in 2018, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center received about 42,000 calls. And of those 42,000 calls, about 11,000 were human trafficking cases. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of times we like to believe that this is an international problem, that this is not happening here in the United States. But this map through the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline number tells us otherwise. So you can kind of see there's a lot of red spots in the parts of the United States. That's where a lot of trafficking is happening. So for Houston, there's a big blot there. The East Coast, the West Coast. So I pulled out, or I Googled an article of a human trafficking sting operation that happened in Spring, Texas this year. So the Houston Police Department, Sergeant John Wall said 47 people were arrested in total, 27 of whom were females and 20 were males. 8 were confirmed victims and 8 were charged with human trafficking related offenses. The youngest victim was 16 years old and another victim was a runaway. So most recruiting occurs online and through social media. And those are just a few images of the people that were busted for human trafficking here in Spring, Texas, so on the outskirts of Houston. So back to the definition that I shared earlier, is the exploitation. It's basically somebody forcing an individual to do things that they don't want to do for their gain. And it's a person. It's an individual. It's somebody that God designed to have a purpose, to succeed in life, but Satan has come in and tried to use his purpose for that individual. And that's why it's so important as the church, as the body of Christ, missionaries, to reach people that are outside the four walls of the church, to let them know about God and that he has hope and freedom for them. But the sad thing is sometimes, which I'll get as I go more into the presentation, it's difficult for the church to have compassion for these individuals that are being trafficked, because sometimes we look at it through our lens that it's something that they want to do, that it's a choice that that individual has made, and that's a misconception. Okay, so I'm going to break down this definition that I've shared. So force is the physical restraint, confinement, bodily harm, physical or sexual. Fraud is deceit, employment, offers or work conditions, false promises, and withholding wages. So a lot of times there might be a young girl that's in Mexico and she wants to come to the United States and live a better life. And she looks up this ad. She sees that she can work at this restaurant, and then she travels here to the United States. But once she gets here, her legal documentation is stripped away from her, and she is not going to be working at a restaurant. She is forced into the commercial sex industry, and she is asked to work, and she's having to pay this I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Debt. Thank you. She's having to pay this debt that she can never, it's just a high debt that she's never able to escape from. So a lot of these predators, pimps, they like to do that to women that they're bringing in because they've paid for their airfare, they pay for their transportation, their food to come to the United States. Coercion is threats of serious harm, bodily harm against any person, abuse of legal process, withholding legal documents, and creating a climate of fear. So that's a big one, because a lot of times society, the church, they will say, why, if a girl is being forced in a residential area, it's right down the street to a police station, why can't she just run to get for help? But these pimps, they like to place a climate of fear on these young boys and these young girls that they will not run to get for help, because that pimp is threatening them. If you go down to the police station and ask for help, I know where you live because when I was grooming you and I used to pick you up when you were in high school, I know that you have a little sister, like I will do something harmful to your family. And as a 16-year-old that's being forced into this type of work, he's placing that climate of fear, and she's thinking, he's gonna do something to my little sister, I'm gonna be a protective older sister, and I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. So human trafficking, I like to place them in 3 different buckets, but there's labor trafficking, which I'll get a little bit into after this, but not really digging deep into labor trafficking. And then there's adults in the commercial sex trade, and there's some with some element of force, fraud, or coercion that would need to be detected for them to be a trafficking victim. But if they're under the age of 18, children and minors, in the commercial sex trade, like no force, fraud, or coercion would need to be detected. So if there is a 16-year-old girl working out on the street here in Bissonnette, and she's saying this is something that I want to do for my life, it's a choice that I've made, she doesn't have the mental capacity to say, this is something I want to do. Like, she would be considered a trafficking victim. So labor trafficking can happen in agriculture, construction, domestic work, and manufacturers. So a lot of times they're held by a debt bondage or threat of deportation. So if they're coming to the United States and they're from overseas, a lot of times the pimp likes to place that fear on them that if they say anything that they're going to be deported back to wherever they came from. So a lot of times that's another way a pimp can keep them from keeping their mouth shut. And then they work long hours for little to no pay. So sex trafficking, as I've mentioned, the adults and the children, approximately 80% of human trafficking victims in America are women and children bought, sold, and imprisoned in the underground sex trade. So I have heard a lot of people that I have come into contact with have shared with me the movie Taken. So they refer to human trafficking, sex trafficking. It's like, oh, it's like the movie Taken. Yes, but it doesn't necessarily always happen like that. And two, there's never really a Liam Neeson that is going to find these individuals that are missing or being exploited. But as I get a little bit more into the presentation, I'm going to be breaking down how this happens, how individuals get caught up into this type of lifestyle, their background, the culture of the industry. Okay, so my question to you guys, I would ask somebody that is working on Bissonnette, it's a track known for prostitution. What would you consider that individual that is working out on the street? What would you refer to her as? Somebody that's working out the street for sex. Yes. So sex trafficking, aka is commercial sexual exploitation, which is forced prostitution. And I know a lot of times you might hear on the news or on Facebook through the feeds of a young girl or she's over the age of 18 and she is working in the commercial sex industry, and she is giving an interview and she's saying that she likes what she's doing, she enjoys it, this is a choice that she has made for her life. And the sad thing is that is plastered for society, for churches, for the world to see. That one interview of this one individual that's over the age of 18 saying that, I like this. This is a choice that I have made. It clouds all of the other young boys, the young women that are forced into this type of industry, that it's not a choice. It's something that they don't want to do. But society, we will look at it through the lens of that one interview that was given or what we see on our newsfeed on Facebook and think women want to do this type of work, when that is a misconception. So prostitution, I just broke it down some ways that prostitution avenues that it can happen are in brothels, on the streets, truck stops, hotel casinos, online, which online is a major one right now where prostitution is happening. Escort services, strip clubs, bars, cantinas, massage parlors, and pornography. These are just different avenues where prostitution is happening. The average age a girl enters into prostitution is 13 years old. So they're very vulnerable and naive. And the root of the issue is a lot of these young children are looking for love. So that is a void that's missing in their life. And these predators, these pimps, they groom on their vulnerabilities. So they meet them where they're at. They start going to their extracurricular activities. They say that you're beautiful, you're pretty. They start buying them fancy purses, getting their hair done, their nails done, It's the grooming process to eventually send them out on the street to work. So who is vulnerable? Would be youth with histories of abuse. And these are a few, but it can be anybody. It doesn't discriminate. The homeless, runaway, or throwaway youth within the foster care system, and child protective services. And then vulnerability is as much a mindset as it is a physical condition. So a lot of times we like to think that a young girl is chained up. Not to say that that doesn't happen, but is chained up in a strip club. I have heard that that has happened here, where girls are brought in and are in cages, chained up to be sold for sex. But a lot of times it's in the mind, where these predators have them chained to do whatever it is that they want them to do. So a few, or these are not a few, I think I have like one or two slides of misconceptions, is they could have run away or asked for help. They should have known better. They deserved it because they didn't avoid the person or situation. They're a criminal, not a victim, and they are inferior or less than a dirty, filthy prostitute. It's their fault because of their choices and behavior, and these girls want or like this. And why they don't ask for help is they've learned helplessness, which a lot of times women that are being forced in a brothel, that are giving sexual services to men all over the Houston area, they have come into contact with maybe 10, 15 men a day that they're giving sexual services to. And I'm sure at the beginning she's drugged, but being forced into this type of work, she's probably asking clients, Johns, that she's coming across, can you please help me? Like, I don't want to be in this situation. And time after time after time after time, they don't do, the men that she is coming across are not doing anything to help her get out of that situation, because then they can get in trouble for going to that brothel. It's just a messy situation. So she's learned helplessness. There's a lack of knowledge of available services and victims' rights, a lack of trust, a language and or cultural differences, which I have seen this going into strip clubs and illegal brothels here in the Houston area, is that language barrier with Asian, Hispanic women. They cannot speak English. Feeling of indebtedness to their trafficker. And a lot of times they feel shame, embarrassment, self-blame due to degradation and brainwashing, an inability to view self as a victim, and fear of retaliation or deportation, isolation or lack of social support and connections. So some Houston statistics: there are over 400 storefront sex businesses operating in Houston, which I believe that's more, because that statistic was, I think, in 2017. And then 85% of women working in the strip clubs who exited the sex industry through Rescue Houston had a trafficker or pimp. So a lot of times strip clubs are a gateway to prostitution. And I have come into contact with women just sitting and hearing their stories, or them just opening up and confiding to me, where they're giving a lot of information out, that I leave that club and I tell myself that they're being trafficked by a boyfriend. A lot of times it's by a boyfriend that they are in relationship with. Okay, so I know you guys have seen this maybe back 2-3 years ago, but the infamous blue, black, white, gold dress that was shown on social media. But there's a point, a reason why I am asking you guys this question. But what color do you guys think the dress is? Is it black? Black or blue, white or gold? Black. The original color of the dress is black and blue, but I know a lot of people see the other, I think it's white and gold, but the original color of the dress is black and blue. If you go to the next slide, is the woman young or old? I can never see the older woman, I always see the younger woman. Who would say that she looks old? Young? Or you can see both ways? I can see the young one, I can't see the old one. I have like 3 more slides. Out of these 2 young women, who would you say is the working girl? Would it be the one on the left side in the black t-shirt? Who would say it's the one in the black t-shirt? The one wearing the dress with the red hair would say is the working girl. Nobody's voting. You have to vote. Who would say the red hair? It is the one in the red hair. And I'm pretty sure some might know the one in the black t-shirt is Aaliyah that died in a plane crash. But yes, she is an escort in Las Vegas, an actual escort. And then here's another slide. I think I have 2 more slides. Who would you say is the working girl? The one in the blue striped t-shirt eating food? Okay. Who would say the other one that's taking a selfie? Okay. It is the one that's eating the, I don't know what she's eating there. And then the one on the right-hand side is one of my friend's Facebook profile pictures. And then I think this is the last slide of the pictures, but we're of a young man. Who would you say is the working kid, young boy? The one in the blue tank top t-shirt or the one that's posing? It would be the one that's posing. Oh, actually we have one more, last one. Would you say it's the one in the shorts or the one that's posing with the black jacket? Nope, the one on the left, yes. So the reason why I showed these 4 or 5 slides of different men and women is because, as I was saying earlier, a lot of times through our lens, we perceive human trafficking to look a certain way. Or for a victim that is being trafficked, I could be a trafficking victim. I have come into contact with women that are very conservative, very put together, and they are being trafficked. And so it doesn't look like the way we think, where you might perceive somebody that is trafficking themselves or is being forced into this type of industry to be wearing short skirts, very, very promiscuous. A lot of times we say that they're African American, and a lot of times it does not look the way that we perceive it to look like. And I know when I did ministry when I was in Vegas, I was there for 3 years because that's where Free International is based, and we were working alongside this woman, this married couple, and their daughter was trafficked in the Las Vegas area and got pregnant by a pimp. But her father was an FBI agent, and her mother was a nurse. And so you would think that background that she had, that she wouldn't have got caught up in that type of being exploited. But the root of it is when she was, I don't know if it was 12 or 13 years old, when she really needed her father in her life. he was traveling like half of the year all over the country because of his job. And so when she was lacking that love from her father, that's when a predator came in, which started out as her boyfriend and then groomed her into being exploited. So I'm going to show a few portraits of exploitation. So these are two different women. The top one you can see just starting out in the industry, and as time progresses, what this lifestyle does to an individual. These are their shots. And then the bottom one as well, as time progresses, like what it does to young women caught up into this type of work. So this is why prevention is so important, because if we can avoid her even getting caught up in this type of industry, like, because the trauma that they have to go through, rebuilding their lives after, the after effect when they get married and they have kids, once they get out of that lifestyle, it does so much damage. So if we can avoid her even entering into the lifestyle, it is very, very important. And then I have another slide of this is the same girl throughout, of a young girl caught up in the commercial sex industry. And you can kind of see the progression. Some potential red flags to keep an eye out on is a girl who has an older boyfriend. And a lot of times, because we do, it's called like the big search, we'll go into hotels and motels and we'll pass out like missing kid booklets during the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, looking for missing children that are being forced into this type of industry. And a lot of times in giving trainings to volunteers that are interested in helping in the effort, we just let them know, young or hotel staff that we're coming into contact with. A lot of times these young girls, these young boys will not give eye contact to whoever it is that they are interacting with. Their boyfriend will buy them expensive items. Their clothing style changes drastically from modest to immodest. Music interest changes, new abusive language that they start using. They start isolating themselves. There's a lack of interest in extracurricular activities. And this route, it happens a lot of times in schools. So not to say that children don't run away and they get caught up in this lifestyle or that they're kidnapped. Yes, that does happen. But the grooming process, it might be a guy that's a junior in high school and he's talking to a girl that's a sophomore. It's like they start grooming them into this lifestyle, recruiting. But a lot of parents are not aware that this can happen in schools, or they're just not aware of the avenues like social media, young children adding guys that they think they're going to school with, and he looks like he's 17 years old, but he's a 45-year-old man that is preying on the vulnerabilities of these young boys and girls. And a lot of times parents would not allow a predator to come to their front door and have access to their daughter, their son, but a lot of times parents are allowing that to happen through the phone. So you give your children access to do whatever it is that they want to do. You have no idea what apps they have on their phone when they go to the room, if they're heading to bed at 9 o'clock at night, and some parents don't monitor their children and what apps they have on their phone and who they are interacting with. So it's very important that parents become aware of avenues that predators use. And I like to give this resource to a lot of churches that I come into contact with, but it's the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. A lot of times I just tell people they can save it in their phone if they come into contact. If you think you suspect somebody is being trafficked, you can call that resource number or call 911. And a lot of times people are like, how can I help? What is it that I can do to help fight against this issue? And you might not be called to give up your lives in the way that Stephanie and her husband and I have given full time to fight against this issue, but you can do something. Like, be vigilant of your surroundings. Like, just me living here in Houston, I'm aware when I go to Walmart, to the gas station, if you see a girl being shoved into her car, call 911. That could be connected to a residential area where there's an illegal brothel going on, but just simply calling 911 can save so many girls' lives. You have no idea the situation, what's going on, but just being vigilant is so important and aware of your surroundings. And I know this issue is so big. It's a huge, vast issue, but I can get so overwhelmed transitioning to Houston and trying to fight against this issue. And I know there's a lot of other anti-trafficking organizations. We need each other. We need the church. We need to come together to combat what Satan is trying to do. But for me, it's like I just focus on the one. Like, I focus on my ministry, going into the strip clubs and the illegal brothels, whoever I come into contact with, whoever I can build a solid relationship with. Like, I'm going to focus on that little piece to the puzzle. I have one little piece to the puzzle. As there's churches that have a piece to the puzzle, there's other anti-trafficking organizations. We all have a piece to the puzzle. Because if we don't focus on that little piece, we can sometimes get very overwhelmed with this issue. So.
Thank you very much.